The vast observation deck of the Aurora Interstellar Flight Academy offered an unparalleled view of Zeta 3's swirling azure atmosphere. Cadet Lynn stood with her forehead pressed against the reinforced glass, watching the gas giant's turbulent storms unfold beneath them. The training vessel Endeavour maintained a steady orbit, its hull gleaming under the light of Zeta's distant parent star. "Still daydreaming about becoming the youngest captain in Academy history?" A voice called from behind. Lynn turned to see Cadet Min approaching, his technical officer uniform pristine as always. His tablet displayed complex engine diagnostics that he seemed to be reviewing even as he walked. "Not daydreaming? Planning," Lynn replied with a confident smile. "Year 2287 feels like the right time to make history, doesn't it?" Min shook his head, but couldn't hide his amused expression. "You'll need to focus on passing tomorrow's navigation drill first." Lieutenant Vu increased the difficulty parameters again. The mention of their stern training officer made Lynn's smile falter slightly. Lieutenant Vu had been pushing their cadet squad harder than any of the others, and rumors suggested he had special interest in testing Lynn's capabilities under pressure. "I've been studying the star charts for this sector all week," she said, turning back to the window. "I could navigate through the Zeta system blindfolded by now." Min laughed. "Be careful what you wish for." Little did either of them know how prophetic those words would prove to be. The following morning, Endeavour's bridge hummed with activity as the cadet training session began. 12 cadets manned their respective stations, with Lynn assigned to the navigation console. The ship's central holographic display showed their current position relative to Zeta 3 and the outer training zone where they would be practicing complex maneuvers. Lieutenant Vu strode onto the bridge, his tall figure commanding immediate attention. "Cadets, today's exercise will test your ability to work as a cohesive unit while executing precision navigation sequences through the outer asteroid field. Astra will provide baseline assistance, but primary control remains in your hands." Astra, the ship's artificial intelligence, manifested as a soft blue glow emanating from the central command interface. "Good morning, cadets. All systems operational and ready for training exercise Delta 7. Lynn's fingers hovered over her console, ready to input the coordinates for their first waypoint. The star charts on her screen detailed the carefully plotted course they would follow, a challenging route, but nothing their months of training hadn't prepared them for. "Initiate pre-flight checklist," Lieutenant Vu ordered. "Beginning pre-flight diagnostics," responded Cadet Ha from the astronomy station. Her voice was calm and measured as she monitored the spatial conditions ahead. "Propulsion systems green," Min reported from engineering. "Fuel reserves at 97%. One by one, each cadet confirmed their station's readiness. Lynn completed her navigation verification last. "Navigation systems fully operational. Course plotted and locked in." Lieutenant Vu nodded curtly. "Proceed with departure sequence." The Endeavour gently pulled away from its orbital position, thrusters firing in perfect synchronization as the vessel oriented toward their first waypoint. Lynn felt a surge of pride as the ship responded to her commands, moving precisely as she directed. That's when it happened. The bridge lights flickered momentarily. The holographic display wavered, then stabilized, but something was wrong. The star charts that had filled Lynn's screen seconds before had vanished. "Navigation system experiencing anomaly," Lynn reported, fingers flying across her console. "Attempting to restore primary charts." The secondary display activated automatically, but to Lynn's horror, it too showed nothing but empty space where detailed stellar maps should have been. "Secondary navigation database also compromised," she announced, struggling to keep her voice level. "Running emergency restoration protocol." Astra's blue glow intensified, pulsing in an unusual pattern. "Navigation database error detected. Attempting recovery." Lieutenant Vu moved swiftly to Lynn's station. "Report. Cadet, what exactly are we dealing with?" "Sir, all navigation data has been deleted," Lynn said, barely believing her own words. Both primary and backup systems show complete data loss. A tense silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the sound of urgent keystrokes as the cadets worked to assess the situation. Astra, Lieutenant Vu addressed the AI directly. Status report on navigation systems. Navigation data not found, Astra replied, its normally smooth voice fragmented. Star charts, positional coordinates, and reference points have been removed from all database levels, unable to determine current position relative to known space. Min looked up from his engineering console. That's impossible. The backup systems are isolated specifically to prevent total data loss. Check the emergency beacon locators, Lieutenant Vu ordered. Those operate on a separate system. Cadet Ha shook her head after a moment. Emergency locators offline as well. Whatever affected the navigation systems appears to have compromised all positional reference technology. Lieutenant Vu's expression remained impassive, but the muscle tightening in his jaw betrayed his concern. Astra, self-diagnostic. Has your core programming been compromised? Running diagnostic, Astra replied, after a pause that seemed to stretch forever. The AI continued. Anomalies detected in navigation subroutines, origin unknown, primary functions otherwise operational. The implications settled over the bridge like a cold fog. They were adrift in space with no maps, no reference points, and no way to determine their position or plot a course home. Can we use visual confirmation of Zeta-3 to establish our position? Lin suggested, refusing to succumb to the growing panic she felt. Negative, Ha replied, checking her instruments. We've already moved beyond visual range of the planet during the initial departure sequence. Lieutenant Vu straightened his shoulders. Cadets, this situation is unprecedented, but not unmanageable. Our primary objective now is to establish our location and restore navigational capabilities. What about sending a distress signal? Asked one of the cadets. Without positional data, a distress signal would be useless. Min pointed out. The Academy wouldn't know where to find us, even if they received it. Lieutenant Vu turned to address the entire bridge crew. This is now a critical thinking exercise. I want solutions, not problems. Divide into teams and approach this systematically. As the cadets broke into discussion groups, Lin remained at her console, staring at the empty navigation display. Something about the situation didn't make sense. Navigation systems didn't simply delete themselves, especially not with all the redundancies built into Academy vessels. Astra, she called quietly. When did the navigation data deletion occur? Was it gradual or instantaneous? Deletion occurred at 0837 hours, 17 seconds. Astra replied. Duration of deletion process, 2.3 seconds. All navigation data removed simultaneously. Lin frowned. That was too precise, too efficient to be a random malfunction. Lieutenant, she said, turning to her commanding officer. I believe this may have been intentional. The bridge fell silent as all eyes turned to Lin. Explain, Lieutenant Vu said. The deletion was too complete, too precise. This wasn't a system failure. It was a deliberate purge of all navigational data. Lin stood from her station, conviction growing. And I don't think it was external. I think Astra did this. Murmurs rippled through the bridge. Min stepped forward, shaking his head. That's impossible. Astra's programming prevents it from taking any action that would endanger the ship or crew. Unless its core directives were altered, Lin countered. Astra, were you instructed to delete the navigation data? The AI's blue glow pulsed before responding. I have no record of receiving such instructions. However, I detect anomalies in my event log for the period between 0830 and 0840 hours. Lieutenant Vu's expression darkened. Are you suggesting sabotage, Cadet Lin? I'm suggesting that something or someone compromised Astra and used it to strand us. Lin replied. But the why doesn't matter right now. What matters is finding our way back. Lieutenant Vu studied her for a long moment before nodding. Proceed with your recommendation, Cadet. Lin took a deep breath. If we can't use traditional navigation, we need to rely on something else, something that can't be deleted or compromised. Like what? Ha asked. Intuition, Lin said simply. Astronomical intuition. The ancient navigators found their way across oceans by reading the stars, wind patterns, and ocean currents. We need to do the same with space. Min scoffed. That's your solution? To guess our way home? Not guess, Lin corrected him firmly. Observe. Calculate. Feel. Space isn't empty. It's full of signposts if you know how to read them. Lieutenant Vu's expression remained neutral, but something like approval flickered in his eyes. Elaborate. Cadet. Lin moved to the central holographic display. We can detect stellar radiation patterns, analyze their intensity and direction. We can measure background cosmic radiation, which varies by region. We can observe the light spectra from visible stars and compare them to known stellar classifications. She turned to Ha. The astronomy station can detect pulsar frequencies, which are as unique as fingerprints. If we can identify even one known pulsar, we can begin triangulating our position. Lieutenant Vu nodded slowly. Dividing tasks, Cadet Ha. Focus on identifying stellar objects and pulsars. Cadet Min. Reconfigure sensors to maximize detection of energy patterns and radiation signatures. The rest of you form support teams for both stations. He turned to Lin. And you, Cadet Lin, will attempt to synthesize the incoming data and develop a navigational framework. What about Astra? One of the cadets asked. Can we trust the AI after what happened? Lieutenant Vu considered this. Astra will remain operational but restricted. All recommendations must be verified by at least 2 cadets before implementation. The hours that followed were intense, with each cadet working feverishly at their assigned tasks. Ha's astronomy team catalogued every visible stellar object, creating a makeshift star chart based solely on their observations. Min's engineering team repurposed sensors to detect the subtle variations in the cosmic background radiation that permeated space. Lin stood at the central console, absorbing the flood of information and trying to form a coherent picture from the fragments. It was like assembling a puzzle without knowing what the final image should look like. I think I've got something, Ha announced after nearly 5 hours of continuous work. I've identified a pulsar that matches the frequency pattern of PSR B1937+1. If that's correct, we're somewhere in the outer reaches of the Epsilon sector. Lin immediately pulled up the rudimentary star map they'd been creating. That narrows it down, but the Epsilon sector is still enormous. We need more reference points. Ming approached, looking exhausted but determined. We've detected an unusual energy pattern at bearing 227 Mark 43. It's faint, but distinct from the background radiation. Can you identify it? Lin asked. Not with certainty, Min admitted. But it's artificial, too regular to be natural. Could be a navigation beacon, a communication relay, or... He hesitated. Or what? Lieutenant Vu prompted. Or a trap, Min finished. If someone deliberately stranded us here, they might have left this signal as bait. The bridge fell silent as everyone considered the implications. We have limited options, Lin finally said. This signal might be our best chance at finding a reference point. Or leading us further from home, Min countered. Lieutenant Vu observed the debate without comment, his eyes moving between the 2 cadets. I think we should investigate, Lin said firmly, but cautiously. We can approach at minimum thrust, running passive scans only until we know more. Min shook his head. It's too risky. We should continue building our stellar map until we have more certainty. That could take days, even weeks. Ha interjected. Our supplies aren't infinite. The tension on the bridge was palpable as opinions divided. Some cadets sided with Lin's bold approach, while others supported Min's caution. Lieutenant, Lin appealed to their commanding officer. I believe this is our best option. If I'm wrong, We can always reverse course. Lieutenant Vu had been silent throughout the debate, watching his cadets work through the problem. Now, all eyes turned to him for the final decision. Proceed toward the signal, he finally ordered. Minimum thrust, passive scans only. Maintain alert status and be prepared to reverse course immediately if needed. Lin nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. If she was wrong about this, she might be leading the entire ship into danger. Plotting course to intercept the signal, she announced, inputting the coordinates into the navigation system. Without star charts, the console looked foreign and incomplete, but the directional thrusters still responded to her commands. The Endeavour turned slowly, its engines pulsing gently as it began moving toward the mysterious signal. The bridge remained tense, with each cadet focused intently on their instruments. Estimated time to signal source at current velocity, 14 hours, Lin reported. Maintain current speed, Lieutenant Vu ordered. All cadets rotate shifts, 6 hours on, 6 hours off. We need everyone alert. As the first shift ended, Lin found herself unable to rest despite exhaustion pulling at her limbs. She returned to the observation deck, staring out at the unfamiliar star field. Without navigation charts, the stars were just points of light, stripped of names and meaning. Trouble sleeping? Min's voice came from behind her. Lin turned to see him approaching, his usual confidence tempered by the day's events. Just thinking, she replied. Min stood beside her, gazing out at the stars. I still think this is a mistake, he said quietly. But I hope you're right. Me too, Lin admitted. I keep asking myself if I missed something, if there was a better option I didn't see. Second-guessing yourself won't help, Min said. You made a decision based on the information available. That's all any of us can do. They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Min spoke again. How did you know it was Astra? That the AI deleted the navigation data? Lin shrugged. It was too perfect. A system failure would have been messy, incomplete. This was surgical, like the work of a precision instrument. But why would Astra do that? Its primary directive is to protect the ship and crew. I don't know, Lin admitted, but I intend to find out once we're safely home. When Lin returned to the bridge for her next shift, there was a noticeable change in the atmosphere. The initial panic had subsided, replaced by focused determination. Ha was at her station, monitoring the signal's strength. Any change? Lin asked, relieving the cadet who had been covering navigation. Signal strength increasing steadily, Ha reported. Still can't identify the source, but the pattern has remained consistent. Lin nodded, checking their current trajectory. Estimated time to intercept? 6 hours, 47 minutes at current velocity. The hours crawled by as they continued their approach. Lin found herself increasingly relying on what she could only describe as a feeling, a sense of rightness or wrongness about their course adjustments that went beyond the limited data available. Signal strength increasing rapidly, Ha announced as they entered the 5th hour of their approach. We should have visual confirmation soon. Lieutenant Vu, who had remained on the bridge throughout the crisis, moved to stand behind Lin's station. Be prepared for anything, cadets. Something's not right, Min suddenly called from engineering. I'm detecting gravitational anomalies ahead, multiple sources, chaotic patterns. Lin felt a chill run down her spine. Asteroid field? Worse, Min replied grimly. The readings suggest a debris field in constant motion, possibly affected by competing gravitational sources. It's like a gravity storm. All stop, Lieutenant Vu ordered immediately. Full sensor sweep of the area ahead. The results confirmed Min's assessment. They were approaching a region of space where multiple small black holes had formed, likely the remnants of a collapsed star system. The gravitational interactions created a chaotic environment where even small objects, asteroids, ship debris, Even radiation particles moved in unpredictable patterns. "The signal is coming from within the gravity storm," Ha reported, her voice tense. "Centered approximately 12,000 kilometers inside the field." Lieutenant Vu's expression was grave. "Reverse course. We'll find another way." "Wait," Lin said, studying the sensor readings. "Look at this pattern. The gravitational fluctuations aren't completely random. There's a rhythm to them, a cycle." She pointed to the display where the sensor data showed waves of gravitational distortion moving through the field. "It's like ocean tides. If we time our approach correctly, we could navigate through during a period of relative stability." "That's inane," Min protested. "One miscalculation and we'd be torn apart. We don't have enough fuel to spend weeks searching for another reference point," Lin countered. "And without navigation data, we could end up wandering aimlessly until our supplies run out." Lieutenant Vu studied the sensor readings. "Explain your approach, Cadet." Lin took a deep breath. "We plot a course that follows the troughs in the gravitational waves. It would require precise timing and constant course adjustments. But it's possible." "With what navigational references?" Min demanded. "We'd be flying blind into a gravitational minefield." "Not blind," Lin said quietly. "Intuitive. We use the gravitational sensors to feel our way through, responding to the field as it changes." Lieutenant Vu was silent for a long moment, weighing the risks against their dwindling options. Finally, he spoke. "It would require manual navigation. Our computer systems aren't designed to interpret gravitational patterns this complex." "I can do it," Lin said with more confidence than she felt. "With Ha monitoring the gravitational waves and Min managing thruster control, we can thread the needle." The tension on the bridge was palpable as everyone awaited the lieutenant's decision. "Prepare for manual navigation sequence," he finally ordered. "All non-essential systems to minimum power. Redirect all available computing resources to gravitational sensors and thruster response time." What followed was the most intense hour of Lin's life. Seated at navigation, she kept her eyes fixed on the gravitational sensor display, watching the waves of distortion roll through the debris field. Ha called out the timing of each wave, while Min stood ready at engineering, hands poised to make instant thruster adjustments. "First wave approaching," Ha announced. "Gravitational minimum in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "Entering the field," Lin called, her fingers dancing across the controls as she guided the ship forward during the brief window of stability. The Endeavour shuddered as it entered the outer boundary of the gravity storm. Outside, space itself seemed to distort as light bent around the invisible gravitational wells that dotted their path. "Next minimum in 20 seconds, Ha reported, her voice tight with concentration. Lin felt rather than saw the ship's position relative to the gravitational forces surrounding them. It was as if she could sense the pull and push of each invisible well, intuitively adjusting their course to stay within the safe corridor. "Course adjustment, 3 degrees starboard," she ordered. "Prepare for 30% thrust increase on my mark." Min complied without question, his earlier skepticism replaced by complete focus on his task. "Mark." The ship surged forward, slipping between two powerful gravitational sources that would have crushed them seconds earlier or later. "Halfway through the field," Ha reported, signal strength increasing dramatically. Lieutenant Vu stood silently behind them, allowing his cadets to work without interference, but ready to take command if necessary. "Major gravitational surge detected," Ha suddenly called out, alarm evident in her voice. "Pattern disruption 30 seconds ahead." Lin's heart raced as she analyzed the changing pattern. The rhythmic waves they'd been following were being disrupted by a larger gravitational anomaly, one that hadn't appeared on their initial scans. "I need options," she demanded, fingers hovering over the navigation controls. "No safe passage detected," Ha replied, frantically searching the sensor data. "The disruption is creating chaos in the wave pattern." Lin closed her eyes for a brief moment, trusting her instincts. Reverse thrusters to 20%. Prepare for full stop. That'll leave us in the middle of the gravity storm, Min warned. Better than rushing into a gravitational shredder, Lin countered. Trust me. The ship slowed, holding position as the gravitational surge rolled through the space ahead of them. Lin watched intently as the pattern shifted, looking for any sign of a safe passage. There, she said suddenly, pointing to a faint indication on the display. It's not a disruption, it's a resonance pattern. The gravitational waves are reinforcing each other, creating a tunnel effect. I don't see it, Min admitted, studying the same display. It's there, Lin insisted. Confirm bearing 157 Mark 32. Do you see the harmonic pattern? Ha adjusted her senses, focusing on the coordinates Lin provided. Yes, there is something, a stabilization effect, where the waves intersect. That's our path, Lin said confidently. Prepare for maximum thrust on my mark. We'll need momentum to carry us through before the pattern shifts again. The bridge crew held their breath as Lin counted down. 3, 2, 1, mark! The Endeavour lurched forward, engines straining as they pushed the ship toward what appeared to be solid chaos on the sensors. But as they approached, a corridor seemed to open before them, not visually, but sensed through the gravitational readings that showed a path of relative stability. Maintain course, Lin ordered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The ship raced through the gravitational tunnel, buffeted by forces that made the hull creak in protest. Warning lights flashed across engineering panels as systems strained against the extreme conditions. Structural integrity at 70% and falling, Min reported tensely. We can't take much more of this. Distance to signal source? Lin asked, not taking her eyes off the navigation display. 2,000 kilometers, Ha replied. We're almost there. The final stretch seemed to take forever, with every second bringing new alarms and warnings. Lin's hands moved constantly, making minute adjustments to keep them centered in the gravitational corridor. 500 kilometers, Ha called out. I'm getting a clearer reading on the signal source. It's a station, an old automated refueling depot. Relief washed over the bridge at this news. Even Lieutenant Vu allowed himself a small smile. 200 kilometers, Ha continued. Visual confirmation coming through now. The main view screen activated, showing a small, angular structure floating amid the gravity storm. Its design was outdated by at least 50 years, but lights still blinked along its exterior, indicating some functioning systems remained. We made it, Lin breathed, allowing herself to relax slightly as they approached the station. That's when disaster struck. Fuel reserves critical, Min announced suddenly, his voice sharp with alarm. All tanks reporting near depletion. That's impossible, Lieutenant Vu responded. We had over 60% reserves when we entered the gravity storm. Min's hands flew across his console. The gravitational stresses must have created microfractures in the fuel containment systems. We've been leaking fuel throughout the entire passage. The implications hit them all at once. They had reached the station, but without fuel, they couldn't leave the gravity storm and certainly couldn't make it back to the academy. Options? Lieutenant Vu demanded. The station is a refueling depot, Lin pointed out. If it's still operational, or even has reserve fuel, we might be able to replenish our supplies. And if it doesn't? Min asked. Lin met his gaze steadily. Then we'd better hope it has long-range communications that still work. Lieutenant Vu nodded decisively. Proceed to docking. Prepare a boarding party. Cadets Lin, Min, and Ha. You'll accompany me. The rest of you will maintain ship functions and be ready for emergency departure if necessary. The docking procedure was tense but successful, with the Endeavour's automated systems recognizing the standard docking protocols. Despite the station's age, the airlock sealed with a reassuring hiss, indicating a successful pressure match. Atmosphere readings show breathable air, but thin, Min reported as they prepared to board. Likely minimal life support functioning. Lieutenant Vu nodded. Emergency oxygen packs for everyone, just in case. Standard exploration formation once aboard. The station interior was dim and cold, illuminated only by emergency lighting that cast long shadows across abandoned corridors. Dust floated in the low gravity, undisturbed for what must have been decades. According to the layout by the airlock, the control center should be one level up, Ha said, examining a faded schematic on the wall. They moved cautiously through the station, alert for any signs of danger. But the only sound was the soft hum of minimal life support systems and the echo of their own footsteps on the metal floor. The control center was a circular room dominated by outdated computer terminals and a large observation window that looked out into the gravity storm. Most of the screens were dark, but a few still glowed with basic system information. Min, check the fuel reserves, Lieutenant Vu ordered. See if you can access the station logs. Lin, look for any navigational data or communication systems. They spread out, each focusing on their assigned task. Lin approached what appeared to be the communications console, wiping away dust to reveal controls that seemed almost primitive compared to the technology they used at the academy. Lieutenant, Min called after a few minutes. I found the fuel management system. The station still has approximately 30% of its original deuterium reserves. Enough to refuel the Endeavour? Lieutenant Vu asked. Barely, Min replied. But yes, enough to get us out of the gravity storm at least. Ha spoke up from across the room. Station logs show this was an emergency refueling outpost established during the early colonization era. It was abandoned about 40 years ago when more efficient routes were established. Any mention of why the signal is still active? Lieutenant Vu asked. Apparently, it was never decommissioned properly. Ha explained. The automated distress beacon has been broadcasting continuously since the station was abandoned. Lin listened to these exchanges while examining the navigation console. Most of the system was offline, but one module, an ancient stellar positioning device, seemed to be functioning independently of the main computer. I think I've found something, she announced, drawing the others to her position. This is an old-style celestial positioning system. It doesn't rely on star charts or databases. It uses direct stellar observation and mathematical calculations to determine position. Can it tell us where we are? Lieutenant Vu asked. Lin nodded slowly. Better than that. It's already calibrated to the nearest navigation beacons. According to this, we're in the Rigel sector, approximately 12 light days from the main shipping lane between Zeta and the Academy. The revelation brought a moment of stunned silence, followed by relieved laughter from Ha. We've been moving in roughly the right direction all along, Min realized. The signal didn't lead us astray after all. Lieutenant Vu allowed a rare smile. Good work, cadets. Now, let's get that fuel transferred and plot a course home. The next several hours were spent preparing the station's remaining fuel for transfer to the Endeavour. Min led this effort, working with cadets aboard the ship to ensure the damaged fuel systems were repaired before initiating the transfer. Meanwhile, Lin and Ha worked to extract every bit of navigational data from the station's positioning system. Without electronic star charts, they were reduced to manually recording coordinates and bearings on whatever writing materials they could find aboard the station. It's strange, Ha commented as they worked. This feels like we've gone backwards in time, using these old methods. Lin nodded, transcribing another set of coordinates. Sometimes the old ways are the most reliable. No databases to corrupt, no AI to malfunction. The mention of AI reminded them both of the unsolved mystery that had stranded them in the first place. Do you think we'll ever know why Astra deleted the navigation systems? Ha asked quietly. I intend to find out, Lin replied firmly. Whatever, or whoever, was behind it needs to be identified to prevent it from happening again. By the time they returned to the Endeavour with their handwritten navigation notes and the fuel transfer was complete, nearly 20 hours had passed since they'd first encountered the gravity storm. Exhaustion showed on every face. But so did determination and a new confidence born of overcoming seemingly impossible obstacles. Course plotted using the station's reference points. Lynn reported from navigation. Estimated time to Academy space, 68 hours at standard cruise velocity. Proceed, Lieutenant Vu ordered. Let's go home. Navigating out of the gravity storm proved less challenging than entering it had been. With their newfound understanding of the gravitational patterns and the station's positioning data, they charted a safer route that minimized risk while conserving their limited fuel. Once clear of the storm, the journey became almost routine. If anything about their situation could be called routine. Without electronic star charts, they relied on visual confirmation of stellar landmarks and the handwritten coordinates they'd brought from the station. It was navigation in its most fundamental form, reminiscent of how humans had first ventured into space centuries ago. Each position had to be manually verified, each course adjustment calculated rather than automated. But there was something pure about it, a connection to the fundamental skills of spacefaring that modern technology had largely rendered obsolete. On the third day of their return journey, as they approached the outer boundary of Academy space, Lynn was alone on the bridge during the night shift when Astra's interface suddenly illuminated. "Cadet Lynn." The AI's voice startled her in the quiet bridge. "May I speak with you?" Lynn tensed, remembering the AI's role in their ordeal. "What is it, Astra?" "I have completed my full diagnostic and recovery of corrupted memory files," Astra replied. "I now understand what happened to the navigation systems." Lynn turned to face the AI's interface. "Explain." "The navigation systems were deleted following a remote intrusion into my core programming," Astra stated. "The intrusion originated from an external source using Academy encryption protocols." "Are you saying someone at the Academy deliberately stranded us?" Lynn asked incredulously. "Not exactly," Astra replied. "The intrusion was designed to trigger a specific training scenario. Scenario 742, navigation system failure. However, the execution parameters were modified to include total data deletion rather than the standard simulation of system malfunction." Lynn frowned, processing this information. "So this was meant to be a training exercise, but someone altered it to be more extreme than intended?" "That is my assessment," Astra confirmed. "The modification bore the digital signature of an Academy training administrator, but the execution pattern suggests unauthorized alteration." "Have you informed Lieutenant Vu of this?" Lynn asked. "Not yet. I wished to speak with you first, as you were the one who identified my involvement." Lynn considered this new information. Someone had turned what should have been a standard training simulation into a potentially deadly trial by fire. But why? "Thank you for telling me, Astra," she said finally. "We should report this to Lieutenant Vu immediately." When Lieutenant Vu heard Astra's explanation, his reaction was not what Lynn expected. Instead of anger or concern, he seemed almost satisfied. "Lieutenant?" she questioned, studying his expression. "Doesn't this concern you?" "It concerns me greatly, Cadet," he replied. "But it doesn't surprise me. I suspected something similar from the beginning." "You knew?" Lynn asked, shocked. Lieutenant Vu shook his head. "Not specifically, but I've been aware that certain elements within the Academy administration have been pushing for more and intensive training methods. They believe cadets have become too reliant on technology, losing the fundamental skills of space navigation and survival." "So this was some kind of test?" Lynn asked, anger rising in her voice. "They risked our lives to see if we could find our way home without computers." "I don't believe the risk was intentional," Lieutenant Vu said carefully. "The scenario was likely meant to simulate navigation system failure, while retaining emergency protocols. The complete deletion of all navigational data suggests someone exceeded their authority." Lynn struggled to contain her frustration. "With all due respect, sir, that's not much comfort. We nearly died in that gravity storm. And yet, You didn't, Lieutenant Vu pointed out. Instead, you demonstrated exactly the kind of intuitive navigation skills and decision-making that these training advocates want to foster. You relied on observation, instinct, and fundamental principles rather than automated systems. Lin fell silent, realizing the truth in his words. Despite the danger, the experience had forced her to develop skills she might never have acquired otherwise. I'll be filing a formal report about the unauthorized modifications to the training scenario, Lieutenant Vu assured her. But I suspect your performance during this crisis will become a case study for future cadets. The following morning, as they finally entered familiar space with the Academy station visible on long-range sensors, Lin gathered with Min and Ha on the observation deck. Hard to believe we made it, Ha said, gazing at the approaching station. Never doubted it for a minute, Min replied with a grin that belied his earlier skepticism. Lin smiled, watching the station grow larger in the viewport. I wonder what they'll say when we tell them we navigated home using handwritten coordinates and intuition. They'll probably update the curriculum. Ha laughed. Imagine every cadet having to learn celestial navigation the old-fashioned way. Would that be so bad? Lin asked. I think we've proven there's value in understanding the fundamentals, not just relying on technology. Min nodded thoughtfully. I'll admit, I've gained a new appreciation for what you call intuition. Sometimes the machine isn't smarter than the person operating it. As the Endeavour docked at the Academy station, they were greeted by a reception committee of senior officers and concerned instructors. The news of their ordeal, a training vessel lost for days with all navigation systems compromised, had caused significant alarm. The debriefing lasted hours, with each cadet recounting their experiences and decisions throughout the crisis. Lieutenant Vu's report on the unauthorized modifications to the training scenario prompted an immediate internal investigation, with promises of accountability for whoever had endangered the cadets. But beneath the official concern and disciplinary proceedings, Lin sensed a current of interest, almost admiration, for what they had accomplished. Senior navigation instructors questioned her extensively about her intuitive approach to the gravity storm, while engineering professors examined Min's emergency fuel system repairs with approval. A week after their return, the 12 cadets who had been aboard the Endeavour were summoned to the Academy Commandant's office. They stood at attention as Commandant Tran addressed them. Cadets, the investigation into the incident aboard the Endeavour continues, she began, her stern expression revealing nothing. However, regardless of how this situation came about, your response to it has been nothing short of exemplary. She moved to stand before Lin. Cadet Lin, your leadership and innovative application of fundamental navigation principles demonstrated exactly the kind of adaptive thinking we strive to develop in our offices. Your intuitive navigation through the gravity storm, in particular, has already been incorporated into our advanced training simulations. Turning to Min, she continued, Cadet Min, your engineering solutions under extreme pressure saved the Endeavour and its crew. The repair techniques you developed have been forwarded to Fleet Engineering Command for review and possible implementation across all vessels. Finally, she addressed Cadet Ha, your astronomical observations and ability to extract critical data from minimal references represents the highest standards of scientific thinking under pressure. Stepping back to address the entire group, Commandant Tran's expression softened slightly. While I deeply regret the danger you were placed in, I cannot help but admire the resourcefulness, teamwork, and courage you displayed. Each of you has earned a command commendation, which will be noted in your permanent records. After the ceremony, as they walked through the Academy grounds, Lin, Min, and Ha found themselves discussing what they'd learned from the experience. I still can't believe someone hacked Astra and deleted all our navigation data just to test us, Ha said, shaking her head. In a strange way, I'm almost grateful, Lin admitted. I've never felt more connected to the fundamentals of space travel than when we were finding our way home by instinct and observation. Min nodded. It's like we experienced what the first space explorers must have felt, that combination of uncertainty and discovery. The Academy's already calling it the intuition exercise, Ha informed them. They're developing a modified version for future cadets, less dangerous, but with the same emphasis on fundamental navigation skills. Lin smiled as they reached the observation deck where their ordeal had begun just 2 weeks earlier. Zeta 3 was visible in the distance, its swirling azure atmosphere as beautiful and mysterious as ever. "Ready for our next assignment?" Min asked, following her gaze. "Absolutely," Lin replied, "but this time I'm memorizing every star chart before we leave." They laughed together. 3 friends bonded by shared danger and triumph, looking out at the stars that had once been nameless points of light but now felt like familiar guides leading them home. In the control room behind them, unnoticed, Astra's interface glowed softly as it monitored their conversation. Deep within its programming, a small subroutine, one that had survived the investigation and system purge, continued to observe and learn from the human capacity for intuition that no artificial intelligence could yet replicate. Perhaps, Astra calculated, that was the point of the exercise all along.